here, Dad.
Yeah.
Okay. We're talking today with Mr. Gabriel Powell of Rockford, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Mr. Powell, can you start and tell us a little bit about yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born on a house. It was on Algoma and Rector on the northwest corner of that farm. There were 10 of us. We were all born at home.
All right. Okay. And that, for the record, that's in Algoma, Michigan.
Yeah.
All right. And what year were you born?
January 22nd, 1916.
All right. Okay. And was this on a farm?
Yes.
Okay. And then, did you grow up on that farm?
Yes.
All right. And what kind of farming did you do? What were you growing?
Well, we had cattle, farmed with horses,
Mm-hmm.
and we always had hogs. My father and another man always butchered them right to home, and well, if he sold them, he had a scale, he could weigh them right at home. Otherwise, every calf, he would cut up and take the hams and smoke them, and the pork meat, he would put it in a barrel and pack salt around it.
Mm-hmm.
We always had pig liver to eat.
Okay. And then, how much schooling did you have?
Huh?
How much schooling did you have? Did you go to school?
Huh?
Did you go to school?
I went 8th grade in the schoolhouse just down the road on Algoma. It was, the school was called Goudsburg.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that hurt me was one teacher, instead of going through every grade, maybe like the grade when I really learned to read, she moved me ahead with somebody else, and I didn't get to reading yet.
Mm-hmm.
We had arithmetic, and a man in Rockford, a hardware man, offered one that won arithmetic would get $10. Well, Margaret London and I were about the same, and when Margaret was older and she'd take her test in Rockford, and I had a higher standard, and so I got the $10.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing, when I was advanced, instead of going through, I was good in arithmetic, but I didn't get all of a 10.
Mm-hmm.
But I did all right with that, and as a carpenter and everything. And one thing I didn't learn to, in high school, I could not read enough to get my history or English. Wasn't good at reading. I never could read good until I got to read my own newspaper at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I can take now and go through a book, and I can't always don't understand when they have certain words, what actually meaning of it is, but I get it anyway.
Mm-hmm. All right.
He graduated from Sparta High School.
Okay. But you did finish high school? Did you graduate from high school?
I went through Rockford in the 11th grade, and then that summer I got a job on a farm on Pine Island, and when it comes school term, my father came up and said, "Gabe, you better go home to go to school." I said, "No, I'm working there and I'll go to Sparta for my good." So I went to Sparta and graduated, but I'm considered a graduate of Rockford.
Mm-hmm.
I've been going to the Golden Hour for quite a few years.
Okay. All right. Now, in what year did you graduate from high school?
I think 1920. See, between
Not 20.
grade school and going to high school, I graduated from grade school I wasn't quite 13. Well, during the Depression, I didn't have anything to start college or school. 3 years before I started in Rockford in high school.
Okay.
At that time, I was 16, and I graduated in Sparta at 20.
All right. So that would get you to about 1936.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
36. They considered me Rockford. I've been going to the Golden Hour. Anybody that's 50 years since they graduated, boy, that's getting to be a big bunch, you know.
I'll bet. All right. Now, after you finished school, did you continue to work on farms after that?
Yeah, first I worked another year for this Cliff Johnson up there. He had, when I first started, $21 and went to high school in Sparta, and the next year he raised me to 35. Well, I worked there for a while that year, and next year he said, "I can't pay that much." I said, "No." I said, "My uncle needs some help." So I went up there, and they were getting quite old. I helped them husk their corn and stuff. And
Okay.
anyways, when that was done, I went and working for my two brothers had bought my grandfather's farm. When he died, the estate was split up, and my mother's share, she left it in for the boys' down payment on the thing, and they'd each make a payment to the bank and one to her, and when they got it paid for, then in 10 years they figured on splitting up. Well, my brother Win took the farm, and Howard took money, and he built a house right on the corner of Wolven and 13 Mile Road, right across where I built my house. Well, anyways, how I was working at carpenter work in Grand Rapids, and Howard had the guy build a house exactly like a two-story one was we were building down on Monroe Avenue.
All right. So you're doing farm work and carpentry?
No, after that was after I came out of the
Oh,
army.
okay.
You know.
Okay. Well, let's yeah.
I was discharged and I got home and I was 3 days home and went out to the barn to milk a cow. My mother had one cow. I went out there and a neighbor, Carl Frisk, was visiting the people across the road and he came over there and said, "Boy, Gabe, you're home." He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know a person home."
Mm-hmm.
I said, but I went over and I got over to Archie Ives and they were thrashing. Well, this Mosier always had a crew, hired a crew to do it. Well, there was none crew. They were short. I told him, I said, well, I went over and helped over to Archie Ives. They were thrashing. Well, they said, what are you going to do? Well, I told him, boy, I don't know. There's nobody here that I know. He said, well, I'm working down there where they're putting up new houses. And he said, you want to go down with me? I said, sure.
Mm-hmm.
I rode down with him and guy interviewed me. He said, what did you ever do on carpenter work? I said, well, I guess the only thing was put an old wood stave silo back together that it would flow down. That's the only kind of, I got it together. He said, well, you want to work? I said, sure, I'll start. He said, I'll give you $1 an hour. Come payday, what's your social security? I said, I never had one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had to go get that.
All right.
So I got paid and
Okay.
had to go down to the union and join up.
All right.
I walked down there and signed up. The next payday, he said, Powell, I'm giving you another quarter. You need some tools. Spend that for tools.
Mm-hmm.
Next time I went down to the union, what are you getting paid? I said, $1.25. He said, a master carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
I never had to. The veterans would have to work 3 years before they got there was a master carpenter.
Okay. All right. Now let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's go back before the war.
Yeah.
Before the war, you were doing farm work?
Yeah.
All right. And then, do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor?
Yes. We had been on maneuvers in Louisiana, went down. We slept on the coast in Florida on the sand. And holy man, was it cold. Well, then we went up the coast to the Carolina maneuvers. And on the way up, they come along and issued gloves for us.
Okay. So, I was asking you about Pearl Harbor.
Oh,
What do you remember about that?
we just got back from maneuvers and we didn't have our beds out. We slept on the floor. We woke up the next morning and they'd hit Pearl Harbor. I said, oh boy, I'll never get a furlough. We'll be
All
in
right.
Japan.
Okay. So you were already in the Army then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you did join the Army in 41, before Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
All right. Now, tell me the story about that. Tell me how you wound up in the Army.
Well, of course, I was 8, and when I went down to get my examination, Dr. DeMog said, Gabe, you're as good as in the Army. He said, you'll be in the Army. He said, I told one other guy, he said, I told Carl Streeter, like you were as good as in the Army. Well, when my card come and never called me, and finally this Kenny Norman had got his, and I guess he found out they was taking the volunteers first. Well, so we both volunteered.
Mm-hmm.
His father said, Kenny, you got to withdraw.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he did. Still, it was way into February before they called me.
Mm-hmm.
I went down to Grand Rapids, the armory, and a whole bunch of us, and this guy Weaver, I guess he had been in World War One, and he lined us up and started us down in formation one. Of course, we couldn't stay in step or anything. We got down to the train station, and from there we went to Kalamazoo. And in the armory down there, we stripped right down bare everybody. They weighed us, measured us for height, measured us for round, and got measurements for shirt and pants, size of shoes and everything. And I guess when that was all done, we got our civilian clothes on, and we was all lined up, and some officer went through the oath of office, and we all had to repeat it. And you're in the army now.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Well, then they sent us to Fort Sheridan. That's where we got our uniforms, and right away they divided us. We had said what we worked out on our thing. I had, my brothers had bought a tractor, and then they bought a corn husker, and my brother and I ran that thing, and we did so darn much corn husking that they paid for that husker that year.
Mm-hmm.
Came home, and well, I'd got my notice, and anyways, like I say, we had to volunteer.
Right. Yeah. Where did you go for basic training? Where was your basic training?
Right in Grand Rapids after we left. And from there we went to Kalamazoo.
Right.
And then we took train to Fort Sheridan.
Fort Sheridan, right. And then
That's
after.
where I got my clothes
Right.
and stuff.
Okay.
And then,
And then what?
well, me being work that I did, they divided things off, and there was a, let's see, a Colonel Peel from Fort Knox. Well, let's see, no, we were in recruit center in Fort Knox, and all nice new barracks. Well, the first thing, there was a sergeant had cavalry hat. His name was Reagan. We get out and talk about a filthy talker, not swearing, everything else. You boys, then when it come to calling off her name, he kept saying, "Pal, pal, pal." Finally I said, "You mean Powell?" I spelled my name, "Yes." And he went through that cussing again. "Don't you know your name when you hear it?" I said, "Nah, I don't. They don't call me Pal, it's Powell."
All right.
Well, the next thing, Sergeant Daly took us down. We was all going into a big mess hall. We get going in the mess hall and he said, "At ease." Well, everybody, he said, "God damn it, when I say at ease, you sit down and take your hat off and be quiet." Well, I don't remember what he told us then about it anyways.
All right. Now, what did the training consist of?
Huh?
What kind of things were you doing at Fort Knox?
Well, they're in the first, there was brand new barracks, and they'd take us out and march us, and always have 10-minute breaks. And this here scratch on my arm was just swollen up, and I had the fever. Holy man, sat there that 10 minutes, I could hardly stand it. Well, anyways, once we got ready, Colonel Peel came and kept reading off names, and you go in this group and you in the other. Got 'em all done. He said, "You boys over there go to infantry. Climb on the trucks and they'll drive you over to infantry." Said to us, we had a great big barracks bag full of a lot of mattress covers and blankets. Pick up your bag and we'll walk to the engineers department. Well, I guess I managed to carry my bag. We get there and this guy kept calling off names and we answered. Finally he said, "Called Fitzpatrick." Called 3 times, and that was different bunch that came, and this big guy Parker said, "Fitzpatrick's over the hill now." Boys, a fine way for a soldier to start out of over the hill. We'll get him in the beam. Well, anyways, we got down there to Fort Knox and went to the old barracks, and holy man, what a mess of barracks. They were World War I
Wow.
barracks, and yellow pine flooring, just slivery, and I was sleeping. we had beds. The bunks turned bottom side up, so you was only about that high off the floor. I was sleeping there, and this guy was Eversole. He was from Montana. He was getting up way before they give the call and sweeping. And I didn't know his name or anything, but I knew he was from Butte, Montana. I said, "You damn sheep herder, stay in bed like the rest of it. I don't want that dust here." Well, that turned out sheep herder went with him for. Well, finally, we moved across the street in another building, and they were 2 stories. I was in the one upstairs, and there was a lot of regular army men. We were with guys that had been in the army for years. I was right next to one by the name Elmy from, I think it was Vincent, Indiana. He wasn't something like 4 foot high. He really wouldn't have qualified for the army, but anyways, we would get on the march someplace or going on a hike, and Elmy would be a trotting to keep up with us. I'd say, "Elmy, get up off your knees."
Now, at this point, were you part of an engineer battalion now, or are you still training?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because see, I'd say the tractor and the corn husker, a lot of them guys were from Nebraska in the cornfields. They had, I guess by that time, they was beginning to have machinery to do it. So that's how I happened to get in the engineers.
Right. Okay. Now, was your battalion, was that part of the 1st Armored Division yet, or does that come later?
No, all of these things in there were part of 1st Armored Division.
Okay.
Infantry, medics,
Right.
the whole outfit was party. I've got a book you go on to read
I've seen that,
afterwards.
Right. Okay. So you're with the 1st Armored Division from the beginning, pretty much.
Yeah.
All right. And then you go out on maneuvers?
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, we go down Louisiana, and some guy monkeyed up some way, and you can dig out the roots of one of them pine trees, and well, he dug around that thing as far as he could throw dirt out, and he didn't dig it out. Cut it off and climb out, and I don't know how they got the tree out, and anyway, fill it in. And then as we went around to Carolina and back, and when I got back in, that was it. That wake up that next morning, it was Pearl Harbor. I thought, but no, we took out our beds and everything, and this was December 7th anyway. Well, I thought, boy, I won't even get a furrow. Come Christmas time, I got my 10 days and was home, and went back, and I thought, now we'll ship out. No, we stayed there. Well, they was already a fighting in Japan. Finally, on Mother's Day, we headed out. At that time, I was driving a auto car with a big trailer behind it. We headed up the Pennsylvania Turnpike. I had never been up that, and I'd think, boy, I'm far enough in the grade, I'd shift into a higher gear. Die right down, I'd have to start over. Finally, I got where I got it. We wound up in Fort Knox, New Jersey. We were there a while, and boy, some of the guys just got, well, they thought it was, they'd get awful yellow. I did too. Well, some of the guys go to the medics, and all they got was 2 aspirin for it. I don't know what use that. But I'd go towards the mess hall, and when I smelled coffee, boy, I was ready to heave up. I'd go back, and I finally, we were in tents, and guys would go to the PX and come back with cupcakes. And I'd order 2 things. There was chocolate and vanilla and stuff like that. And I found out, I think it was the chocolate ones, I could eat and didn't bother me. By God, I cleared up my, it wasn't really that at all.
I thought they had hepatitis.
But anyways, then at the time we headed in New York, and it was just dark, and they grabbed your barracks bags, and then we just dragged our barracks bag through a big warehouse. Finally came out and out in the daylight, and boy, I could see the Statue of Liberty and the flag, and we got on the Queen Mary. We was in rooms, there was no, I don't know if there was a bed or anyway. I was in a room, and I did take a little ivory hanger and take it on, and I think I got it somewhere now. But anyways, we went, I guess, north, and Iceland. The first thing they let us out on deck, and it was dark in there. Holy man, it was loaded. Well, you had about a sack, a pound sack. When I got out there in the fresh air, boy, I filled that sack. Anyways, we went as far as the planes would go, and then we headed somewhere to zigzag, and finally we met planes from the other way, and pretty soon we pulled up at Belfast. We got off and got on a little tug. I get in the tug, and I start coming up the stairway up, and I looked up in the ceiling, and there was coins in there. I said, "What are them coins?" He said, "This thing was in the evacuation of Dunkirk." He said, "Somebody blew up and there's coins stuck in there."
Oh,
Well, when they unloaded us, there was a guy from Brooklyn. He, funny voice, he said, boy, when you, I don't know how, he said, you just wait, they'll give you meat pie when you get off. They give us meat pie. It was made out of sheep stuff
oh,
and cold.
Mm-hmm.
You think us guys could eat that tallow stuff? This guy got all the meat pies he wanted.
Mhm. All right. Did your unit stay in Northern Ireland for a while?
We went as far as Dunkirk and stayed there, and
Not Dunkirk.
that was
Dunkirk is in France.
Ah.
Dunkirk is in France, so I don't think you went there.
no, I was in Dunkirk. That was Ireland,
Ireland, yeah.
and out there was shallow water and barbed wire strung all over. I guess when the tide went out, a glider plane could have landed.
Mhm.
Well, one night they put me on guard, and boy, it went down, and I'd had a bottle of Bass Ale, and I got to, boy, I'll never see that flag waving again. I'll be killed. I was on guard, and I was drinking that Bass Ale, and I go down there tavern, and I was on guard, had my gun with me, and in come Sergeant Brees. I thought, oh boy, here I am drunk on you. He said, Gabe, I'm gonna talk to the old man. You need a better rating. Well, that was it. I finally quit drinking. From there, when the first meal we had biscuits and eggs. Well, it was dried eggs. You take, get them that egg on your plate, and I guess that dried egg had just rotten. Boy, you could not eat it. That thing, we're just full of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the biscuits were so hard you could hardly eat them. Another guy had been in the Marines. He would make some biscuits and stuff. First, the stovepipe was plugged on great big kettle down there where the hot water was to wash things. He gets up on the roof, and there was a big corrugated asbestos roof. He gets up on there, gonna clean the stovepipe. Broke through. He almost landed in the hot water. Anyways, when he made his biscuits, they were so hard, the guy just threw them around like golf balls.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, at this time, were you mostly a driver, or did you do other work?
No, well, I had been going on. Anyways, we moved from there to Morn Park in Ireland. And there in Morn Park, there was closed gates and stuff, and anyways, there in one time the Scottish band came and played with skirts and stuff, and we seen that. A guy on a one horse and two-wheel cart, and he had a great big barrel. He rode on top of that barrel, and he'd go to the latrines in a great big tub, take that out and dump it in his barrel and on back. He'd always go to mess hall, get some tea, never wash or anything, riding that sloppy home.
Okay. All right.
Well, we just did a lot of training there, and
Now, what kind of jobs did your company do? Did you build bridges or?
yeah, this was, I was in, at the time, E Company. First it was D Company, and I'll have to tell you, back in Dix, we go down on the parade ground and we'd be in formation, and this General Daly would come and had one of them little things like they whip horses with. He'd point to the guy, he'd say, "When'd you shave?" "Last night." "Get out of here, bum. Go up and shave again." The guy started walking. "Double time." I said, "Get out there." Next one, Price, he had dark beard, but "When'd you do it?" "This morning." "Good soldier." The next thing, Colonel Levine come to, said, "Good morning, General." This, "Who in hell are you to call and tell me it's a good morning? Go over, double time to the flagpole, report the way you have to." Well, what he was supposed to do was, "I'm Colonel Levine of the Engineers." He was no good morning. Well, he didn't get back in time anyways. And while I was there, I got that yellow, and I decided, boy, it just, I'd go down, we had our trucks, and my corporal said, "Gabe, just lay down under the truck like you're working on a truck. They see you and they won't think you're working on a truck." But I was there because I just couldn't stand up or I'd heave up. Anyways, when I got a lot of the guys that did go on sick call, I thought, they'll never wind up with us. They'll wind up in the infantry or something. But they did come back and to our own company.
All right. Okay. Now, so you're in Northern Ireland for a while. You're in Morn Park, and then.
And then up at Morn Park.
Right.
Well, we was in Morn Park quite a while, and there was Harlan Reynolds. One day, the captain said, "Gabe, get a driver in a truck and your gun loaded and go down. Harlan they've got him locked up being drunk." Well, this Harlan always at the company would, on payday, and these old barracks had a nice new barracks for heating. And when they was gambling, this Harlan would have quite a wad of money sometimes, and he'd always come and he trusted me, and he'd poke his bill under the bed. About 3 days, Gabe, where's my money? I said, it's still under the pillow there. Anyway, come election time, and Harlan had to go home to Harlan County where the election was. He came back, and boy was he black and soot. He had get under the train and ride the rails. I say, how'd it go, Harlan? He said, no shooting this time. He said, there was a knife for now. That's the way it was. But that time I went to get him when he got out, he said, Gabe, I gotta have a drink. Well, I just stood out there. I said, right there's a liquor store. He came out with a bottle, and we got in the truck, and I was in the back with him, and he started drinking it, and pretty soon he gets to the back of the truck and even up. I laid my rifle down and held on to him so he didn't fall out. Finally he got enough of it out of him, he was all right. We gets back to the company, and they put him in the guardhouse, and about 3 days afterwards, I seen him. He was over where they was having a fire, and they'd have these cans. The cans at that time weren't just crimped. They had lead to close them. Well, he was melting that lead off. He came over and he said, Gabe, you got my bottle? Sure, I got it. I give him his bottle. He was drinking again. But he got away with it anyways.
All right. Okay. Now, from where did you go after Morn Park? Did you go to Africa next, or England, or?
No, that's, I guess, when we went to Fort Dix.
Well,
But then when we left Fort Dix,
well, we gotten you over to Ireland. So after
Well,
Ireland,
we moved on the St. Mary's and got to Ireland, yes,
Yes.
and from Ireland, I was on the truck and went across to England, Scotland, and everything a couple of times and back, and finally the whole division was shipped out, and they landed in England. We went around Scotland, and we went through one town. Holy man, it was dark. Just the factories was using coal, and it was just a mess. So dark with coal smoke. We got someplace where they was building a new camp and ripped up the sod and everything, and was planting stuff. Well, we stayed in them barracks, and one day there was a guy, Moscovitch. He was Russian. He came in quite drunk, and he come in his barracks and turned the lights on, and when it was a long place, gets way down to the end, turn out them lights. He would pick up a shoe and throw it, keep throwing trying to hit the light. Finally, somebody turned the lights out anyways. That was it. But there in where we were, one day I went to, I don't know what town I went to, but anyways, I missed my boat truck coming back, and when I got back, they had bed check. Well, I wasn't there for bed check. And the officer said, "You boys that missed bed check will pile of this sod as high as your head." And it was a rain and everything. Them guys had piled their sod and slumped down. Well, I had been on a farm where I guess it was to home, we'd raise cranberry beans, and they didn't get ripe. We put a pole in the ground and stacked them around till they was ready to thrash. Well, I go and get a good big stick and ram it in the ground, just put the sod on. I was in bed.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them guys worked all night and never did get one, and it just slumped down.
Okay. Now, when you were in England, did you get to go to London?
No.
No.
The only where we went seemed like Manchester
That
or
could be.
something.
Yeah.
And that's where I missed riding that dude.
Right. Okay. And then from England, did you get back on boats again and go to Africa next?
No. Let's see, where did... Well, back and forth. Finally, yes, we went to... That's when we went to Ireland, Dunkirk. After Dunkirk, we went back and we went in, I guess it was Scotland, right along the Clyde River, parked our trucks, and we slept in the trucks, and we were supposed to eat up in the big warehouse, and we didn't like their English thing, and we would go to a PX and buy our meals, and oh, I guess before that in Africa, no, that was it. Anyways, we parked along the Clyde River, and when we got ready to go, it was an awful storm. And this boat that we were on was made to travel a St. Lawrence Freeway, so it was shallow draft. Well, a wind that night swung that boat around and the ankles got tangled. The rest of the convoy was heading for Africa. Instead of going around the islands, we went right along the coast. We could see the lights in Spain. We caught up with them at Gibraltar. We would unloaded somewhere, I think Oran.
That's probably right.
First thing we got off, there had been some of our other unit had unloaded it for us. We gets off and pretty soon we seen an Arab with a barracks bag. It had a secret thing on it, engineers, and this guy had it, he'd cut holes in it and tied it around the belt and used it for pants.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said, well, I think it was McDowell ran out of cigarettes, needs some money. Anyways, the next thing when we landed, there was a great big bay, deep bay, and here was a British boat, I think it was a Rodney, and there was a plane that was diving down like it was gonna bomb that. First thing we know, he didn't come up. He wound, and that was the end of him.
Okay. Now, when you got off the boat, did you stay in Oran or did you go someplace else?
No. From like I say, from Ireland we went across,
Right.
made a couple of trips for something
Right.
back and forth to England.
Right.
Finally we went there, and we went, like I said, along the Clyde River. And
Right.
we,
Right. But we've gotten farther than that in your story now. We've landed you in Africa.
Yeah,
You're at Oran.
yeah.
Then what do you do then?
Well, when Germans surrendered, first we were in there, I and Tex, my thing, was in a tent, and I forget what the name of it. But anyways, Tex got appendicitis, and I had to help carry him on a stretcher. Boy, did I have a time getting him in an ambulance, and come back, and I had to turn his stuff in. That night, holy man, there was 6 inches of snow, and I just about froze. I turned his stuff in, just my own. I had an awful sore throat. Well, he soon came back, and I said, already you? Yeah. I told him, he said, go to the truck, and in the tool department is a bottle of lemon extract. Take that. Well, I took one swallow, and I think it was all alcohol. Holy man, I spit it out, but that cured my
Your sore throat, yeah.
I was all right.
All right. Now, when you landed in Africa, were there still Germans in Tunisia then? Was there still fighting going on there?
Yeah, Rommel was in
Right.
down in, what is it? Desert Fox, what they
Yeah.
call Fox in that sand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, finally we were, one night, I don't know where we were in, but anyways, we was going over mountains, and it was a cloudy, dark night. They shined the airplane lights on the sky, and that made it light enough so we could move, and we got moved. In this place they called the Mousetrap, where the Germans had just sliced the English back, and then the Canadians. Well, when we got that night, we got in that position where they was, and I parked my truck and they said go out to the road and direct rest in. I just get in the road and boy, a plane come down the strafe and things, and I run the one into the culvert and got down, and when they came back I got the other. Finally this Pertilio truck, and I don't know what. Pertilio was a guy from California, and I don't know, his partner he wasn't as neat. He always called him Crummy. He said, "Hey, Crummy," he said, they'd hit his truck on fire. He had the pig in there. They was gonna, he said, "Hey, Crummy, there goes our pig." The next thing, there was a great big hole watching. They started shelling the heck of us down there, and there was, I don't know I can't remember now what his name was, but in Fort Knox, when Pearl Harbor come, he came back into camp. He was all over the hill. And he was one guy, he would swipe your neckties, have your name on it, sell them for a little nothing. Anyways, when we was there, they started shelling, we was in that hole, and he jumped out when they shelled and run. I went out and tackled him. Get back, I said, "You fool is out there, you'll get killed."
All right. Now, this tape is... All right. You were talking about what was happening in North Africa. And you were being hit with artillery shells, and you had to pull the guy back into the hole.
Well, the first armored come in there with enough ammunition and food and everything. They figured on staying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had a good view. The First Armored 6th Division was going up, I guess they called it Pork Chop Hill, because the infantry had pork chops for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, they go up there with guns and flamethrowers just burning the brush. Well, them Germans there fled over that hill and got down on low ground, and they went just way out on lower ground, just like it was in Pearl Harbor. Them soldiers that went down there and was able to stay, and I guess submarines kept them. Well, these guys, when they come run out of food and water, they found out they had surrendered. We had a real scene of them Germans coming in loaded with their trucks with men, and them that weren't were marching in formation, and they were marching like they was on the parade ground.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, a wall of men that was surrendered. But of course they flew a Rommel out there to help in England or in Europe.
Right.
But anyways, once everything was, we went someplace in Africa there was a great big hole, and they had the stage set up, and course, we were all up on the higher hill, and the general said, we're gonna go to Rabat and have a good time. He said, don't try to take on all the women in one day and drink all the whiskey in one day. You're gonna have a good time. Well, and pretty soon, a lot of them from Hollywood were there, and I don't know whether Bob Hope or anyways, they was singing and doing stuff, and they get done. Then there was a quartet of 4 men from light tank battalion got down there and was singing, and this baritone says, she was fat and she was fragrant, and her poppy turned her picture toward the wall. That wall, and just like a bull roaring. Well, them from Hollywood just cheer. He had to do that 3 times. He took the show entirely. Boy, that he fragrant instead of fragrant.
Right. Okay. Did you ever see General Patton?
Once he was with during our outfit, and this truck I was driving, boy, if you caught the hub, the wheel would turn, and the steering wheel would go like a buzzsaw. You didn't get your thumb over. Well, he come with a railroad, knocked that sign down. I wasn't about to hit that sign, because I knew what had happened. Anyway, that's all I ever seen of Patton with. It's just, you know, the guys think what a great general he was. Well, after the Battle of the Bulge, you know, Patton run his tanks and men and stuff till he ran out of gas. Well, there were setting. A lot of guys afterwards warmed up. Eisenhower took all the generals out there. It was warming. He seen guys that was German and American together trying to keep warm and frozen died. And maggots are going out of them. They tell about called Patton blood and guts. Well, I'd say he had the guts and it was a soldier's blood.
Pretty much.
He didn't care how many soldiers he used for gunfighter. Just gonna be glory for him.
All right.
Well, if he had been driving that Cadillac and got killed, he'd found out he was the goat of the army, I think.
All right. So the Germans now have surrendered the Germans surrender in North Africa. And that's
Yeah.
like May of 43. And
then we went, was it Algiers is still in Africa?
Yeah.
Anyways, there was a guy, Willard Warwick from Omaha, Nebraska. We always called him Omaha. And there was Culpepper, was always a good friend of mine, and we had got my truck and all gasoline ready to go and waiting. We was assigned to B Company, always helped us, and we went on the job. We furnished the bridge and the equipment, but B Company furnished the men and stuff. Well, anyways, this Sergeant Arthur for B Company was in charge of us. We'd say, "What's gonna happen, Sergeant?" He'd say, "Well, you can go on down. We had ran out of money or something. We had to go to PX and get food and stuff and run out of money. And one time Warwick was on kitchen duty. Pretty soon he came back and he said, "Get ready, we're going to town." "Where you get the money?" He said, "I got that mattress cover the bread came in." He said, "I dumped the bread on the table." And we take the mattress, white mattress cover, and some Arab would give at least $10 for it. We got that. We gets on the truck and going. Three of us, and pretty soon here climbs a guy, uniform and everything, and he said, "Can I go with you guys?" He said, "I've got $100. He was just a crew. He said, "They tell me you gotta be careful. Some of these kids will just rob you." He said, "And I got $100. I go with you." "Sure." Well, we get in town and we get to drinking and everything, and we was finally trying to lose him, and we had ran out of brandy. And this guy said, "Hey, there's another liquor store. I'll go get a couple bottles of brandy." I said, "Now we can lose him." Culpepper said, "Oh no, did you hear him say 2 bottles? We'll help him with that." Well, we helped him with the 2 bottles. We get pretty well loaded. We get ready to go home. We get to catch a truck. We got pretty noisy on the street, and the Canadian MP picked us up, and in we went. Got in front of the man at the desk, and he said, "First, point, hand over your pocketbook." I said, "Give me a receipt, what's in it?" Whack, I got one, had lead with a long thing. Culpepper, "What did you hit him for?" Boy, he hit Culpepper and knocked him right down. Well, Warwick just handed things over. Anyways, they took us in. There was a thick door open. In there we went, and the walkway was about this wide, and up the other side was smeared up about that much higher. Up it was probably only 12 feet wide, but about 18 foot high. And up in the high corner was a little light with bars on it. Anyways, we slept on that. And the next morning we get out there, they give us sea ration and we eat, and darn pretty soon this guy that we'd lost come. He said, I don't know how come I lost you. Well, we lost him. When they turned us out, we went out. We didn't go back to camp that day. We stayed that day and had money enough. Finally, the next day, we got back with it, bro.
Okay. And you said you had the truck. The truck was all packed in cosmoline, so
Yeah.
you were going to be shipping out?
Well, when I loaded on my truck on the boat, and we got to a place that was a great big kind of a bowl that stopped in. They picked my truck up in the net, and big boom swung it over and dropped it in the net and the side of the boat. About that time, bombers kept going by us strafing. Here I sat out there, and just on that deck you could just hear the cartridges rattle and pound on. I thought, holy man, they'll hit me out there. Finally it settled down. He loaded me in the thing that truck would just fit in it. And he took off for shore and give me a pole and said, see, I said, no, I couldn't. I said, if I could done that, I could have come clear across the Mediterranean. Well, when we was coming, I'd have to tell you before, on this boat, and it was just so calm, there wasn't a ripple on the water. And this man that run the boat they had some kind of like a fish that dragged out there, I guess, to catch any mine or something. Well, that thing would get tangled, and he was swinging, and he'd have to run up a black flag and stop and get it out. And when he got it out, we got where we was, and like I say, we unloaded, and I told him I couldn't go. So he pulled back, and he went out, and boy, he poured it right on. And then he let up that big bunch of water on. He just poured it on and rode up on that, and when it settled down, he says, that's it. He opened the gate, and I drove out, and I was in water to my knees in the camp.
So was that on an LST? Was that an LST or a landing craft, or what was that? You said he opened the gates and you drove out.
Well, yeah, I loaded into thing that would unload tanks or anything.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, this bridge truck was a load would just fit in it.
Right.
But anyways, that big float, I got far enough, he said, that's it, and I got on shore, and there was a Jeep there leading me where we'd go, and there was already something with the company there, and I get there and unload that, and going back after another load, and boy, it was dark, no helper. Pretty soon I caught a edge of the culvert, and that steering wheel just spun, and it didn't stop. It went right on, tore the steering wheel loose, and it went through and broke. The gears stuck right out where you could see them. Well, a wrecker picked me up and took me in. I finally got it fixed and come back, and here my helper come, just his rifle. I said, I thought they was just afraid we was gonna have to evacuate. They were just sending ammunition. Nothing. He was supposed to help load. I said, how come you got? He said, I got it on there. He said, you can't dig a foxhole on there. He said, I got on the truck, stuck on the truck.
Now, what was this story? Was this when you first went to Africa, or was this when you landed in Italy?
No, then I was landing in Italy.
Italy, right.
Well, I got off, and when I went in, I didn't land at Salerno where the rest of them. I landed in a place, it was Bagliani. Well, that was a place where I finally, our Colonel Stanley was the head of the engineers in Fort Knox. Well, he was old enough, they was gonna make him go and supervise the road to Alaska. Well, he had nothing to do with it. He came, he was dressed in a German uniform and had a German motorcycle. He come back there and he said, way down where we were back, you can join up with the rest. We did and started going. Anyways, the next thing we get far enough, we was on what they call the Leary River. And we had at least 13 bridges on. It'd come spring and thaw, and they was Rapido River was on up, and it was quite a hill to get up there. And boy, it was really a lot of water coming when that thawed. Boy, we had 13 bridges. One of them, this little Elmy was a corporal, was a guard on it. And a tank came along, towing another tank behind it. Elmy, stop, you can't cross this bridge. It wasn't reinforced for that much weight. That lieutenant, get out of the way, we'll run over you. He didn't stop. He got as far as the other side and jumped off the tank, and by that time the bridge was down and tipped over. The driver in that got tangled up in the camouflage net and couldn't get out. He was drowned. And during that flood, we lost, the Germans had opened all them big dams and let the water out, so they was really we lost 6 bridges from that. When it come time to salvage them, I was the first one. We went down on the flats, and it was a great big grade where the high water was to watch it. Went down that and got a load of stuff. Come to go out, and I was the first one. I gonna climb up that and couldn't do it. Run my cable out and hooked it to a tank. Started winding, pull the tank, couldn't do it. Let off in the tank, turned, put the cable under the tank and on this other side and was sideways. Boy, then I I had already broke the shear pin. I didn't have another one. I looked, and all I had is a Phillips screwdriver, and I used that for a shear pin. I took off, and boy, that tank held. I got up out of just plowed the mud, got up out of there. When the guy said, see, I use a shear pin, they said, it's a wonder. He said, you could have broke that cable and come back through the windshield and sliced your head right off. I said, I just had my foot on the gas and down below the dashboard.
All right. So
Took
you're
it out.
okay. So you basically you get to Italy. It's going to be the fall of '43 because we land and you arrive in Italy in the fall, so late in the year, and you're there through the winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're bridging rivers, and that's when the fighting is going on at Cassino and the Rapido crossings and all of that stuff. But you spend the winter pretty much in that part of Italy.
Yeah.
All right. Did you see much of the Italian people? Were there civilians around?
Well, not there, no. It was all them bridges and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But as we went farther in Italy, we would be at the mess hall, and they'd be just loaded with little kids. And an old woman, they'd have a can or something, and when we got through eating, go to the dump stuff. First, even if we had some coffee or some food, we'd pour it in that can for them kids. Well, them kids got fed.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, did you land at Anzio? Did you go to Anzio? Is Anzio the farther north?
To
Anzio. Anzio.
Yeah. That morning I didn't have one bit of trouble getting ashore.
Mm-hmm.
Slept in under my truck that night, and holy man, the Germans had a great big battleship gun on the freight car
Mm-hmm.
in the tunnel.
Right.
Well, they bring that out, and whoa, and then it just cracked. Right. Miss Eversole was sleeping under the truck too, and next morning I was digging a foxhole. Said, "What are you digging a foxhole?" I said, didn't you hear that lesson? Well, I woke him up the next night. He dug a foxhole too. And anyways, we'd go, that big gun that hit something down in the harbor and about, there was cubes of about a yard square would run up, and our crane would pick them up and put them on our truck, and we'd bring them up and dump them off, and one of the other companies, B or something, would take an air hammer and chip them up, and they used that to gravel what they call the Appian Way.
Mm-hmm.
And these buildings that had I-beams on, we bring them up, and there in the grove we take them I-beams and take ammunition boxes were, I'd say 3 foot long, and there was probably 6 inches. Fill them with sand. We just built them up, had a big, about 16-foot square, dig the sand out, fill them, and lay them just like bricks around. All we had is an opening, and we'd fill them with them I-beams, and I-beams close enough to carry them, put them on, so we had everything with sand on it. We even put more sand on top of that, all it would take. Boy, we had a nice place to stay. They would shell us sometimes, and sometimes a British plane would come over, and some way they didn't have a carburetor, they just had the fuel pump, and it'd go woo, woo, woo. Well, we knew that was a British plane, but the Germans had something like that too. Well, we always never fire at them. It was low. You could. Sometimes it was a German plane, and they could spot things, and they'd drop down what they call popcorn flares.
Mm-hmm.
One time it hit the net over the truck and caught the net on fire. We had to jump out and get the fire out for that. But that's about all it done to it. But in that place while we was there, sometimes we'd wake up and there'd be a Jeep with a trailer on it, and just dead men loaded like cordwood on them. They'd pick them up at night and stop right there in our camp, and next morning I guess they take and bury them. Boy, I'm telling you, the crosses before you get to the beach was just loaded with crosses where they'd bury them.
Right. Now, at this time, you didn't have very much to do, did you?
No.
No bridges to build until they got out of there.
No. Well, this Warwick, he never liked to stay with the company. You'd always get some duty to do. So he was my helper. said, we'll volunteer to go with B Company. Well, we went to B Company, and I don't know if anybody was in charge of us, but we was fed right, and went quite a while, nothing done. One night, boy, it was really a foggy night. I started out, and Jeep led me, and I turned around and I backed my truck probably a quarter of a mile and stopped and got out, and it was still awful foggy. I got up on my truck and raised it. It was a U-frame, raised that enough so it released everything, and I was on there, and pretty soon I heard a Tommy gun go off. Horrid. I said, well, that's ours. Well, that was a signal. I guess they all said, get out of here now. Well, here I was up on the truck when I had a big long hold fast that you put pegs in to hold the bridge from sliding with me. I hadn't heard get out. Next thing I seen was a squad of guys, and they didn't have helmets. They had long-billed hats. Boy, them are Germans. Here I was up there. They cut loose, and it was just bullets going by me up there like a hive of bees. And I thought, how come they're all just red? They must be all tracers. Well, I didn't realize when they come out of a gun, they're all red hot. Well, they nicked that frame, and well, I jumped up on the over that frame, and then on the cab, and down on the hood, got down below, and here was Sergeant Earnshaw waiting there. He said, what will he do? I said, we'll have to hit the ditch. We gets over there, and it was still foggy on the ground. I took off, and pretty soon I was on my back. Emerson, what'd they do, get you? I said, no, it's that barbed wire. I'd caught the trap that caught you under the chin or something. It tore a hole through my lip, and the other one arm had hit the other wire, and boy, it was just, them veins was just bare. If it went across, it didn't cut them. Well, I had a lot of blood on my... Anyways, when I got up from that thing, and Eversole said, what do I do now? I said, we'll have to hit the road. Well, I was just confused, and I stopped right by the tank that was waiting for a bridge. I laid there a while, and pretty soon 88's back and forth with that. I thought, boy, I got it. Well, when it stopped, the half-track came back, and he said, Powell, we'll try to get your truck. Well, this half-track had a roll bar. I was riding on that, and he had the door open, was no bullets could go through, and he was just a popping the Germans at the Germans in the ditch, and when he ran out of ammunition, boy, them Germans what? He said, told her, get out of here. Boy, away he went. I had to get out. That's when I got as far as the tank and stayed.
Did you ever get your truck back?
When they got to firing, I said, boy, I gotta get out of there. I crawled under a wire and went out in the field and laid down in like a plow furrow. Pretty soon I knew it was my truck just a-roaring. Well, Warwick had came back, and they had laid the bridge. Luckily, both front tires was good, but it was dual backs and two-wheeled tires on each one. I think there was 5 flat tires. Well, when I just heard that truck roaring, I knew it was there. Boy, I quick got up and got out there and rode. It was just going slow. And here was an infantry said, help me, help me. I took a hold of him and got in the truck, and he had had a bullet through his thigh. He sat on my lap, and we started going down the road that was clear on one side. The other side was tag orders, and holy man, there was a few Americans, but just loaded with Germans. We going slow, and them 88s were fired and hit the ground, and the dust would just go like a side delivery rake. The dust would be rolling around. And we get to going up. Right? Pretty soon we come to an infantryman, and he had 2 German officers behind him, or in front of him, had the bayonet. And he'd goose step. Them 2 hours just slow. Boy, I bet we went halfway the length of a football field before we got by him. And we went on. I don't know, ever saw, when he first, I didn't see him again, but we got to the bit where the brickworks was. By that time the fog had went, and boy, I got up on a straw stack and I went to sleep. Finally, Warwick woke me up. Well, it was time to go, I guess. I think that was the next day. Got back to the company, and they left my truck at the maintenance to get tires on it, and I was staying in their dugout, and one time I come out of there, and the awfulest sound down at the harbor. The air just knocked me right back in. The only thing I can think I must have hit our TNT and took it off, because I never heard such a boom as that was. Anyways, finally, my first sergeant come, looked at me, and Gabe, he said, coming. Looked at me, you better go to the medics, and there was blood and straw and that stuff. And I didn't realize. I said, no, I'm getting where I clear my head, I can see good and everything, and so I don't know. Well, I didn't go. If I had, I would have had a Purple Heart too for them wounds. But I went and finally got to the company and was eating, it was all right. That healed good because you take shots and don't whether barbed wire or what, you ain't gonna get infection.
All right. Now, eventually, you guys got out of Anzio.
Ah,
You got out of Anzio eventually.
yeah, but I would have to tell you, I read in the paper and it told the date we landed on Anzio. Now, holy man, I said that was my birthday when I landed that morning. Well, anyways, we was there quite a while.
Yeah, you
and
were.
they would be an Italian he had a pig. Well, he slept right side of that pig pen so the troops didn't get his pig. Well, there was a great big ox down in no man's land. One time the maintenance took the wrecker truck down there and they shot that ox, brought it up, and boy, did we have meat and everything. And we had our mess sergeant Krasinski had lost his right. And a guy by the name of Shooping was a guy that had trouble even keeping his weight. He was mess sergeant. Boy, did we get fed good. And finally the maintenance company cleaned up a small keg or something and fixed it up. This Shooping would get eggs and milk, and darn if we didn't make ice cream. And we were getting fed so good that all the officers in the bridge company would come and eat with our officers. And this Sergeant Logan was ours, and he had big ears. Somebody says, I wonder what Logan was in civilian life. I said, probably with them big ears, he was probably a clown. Well, the guys would call him the clown. One day, them officers come to eat. Said, where's the clown today? He wasn't there. Anyways, the officers had picked it up, called him the clown, I guess.
Right. All right. Now, can you move us forward now? Okay. You
Yeah.
finally break out of Anzio, but you were there for 4 or 5 months. You were there a long time.
Yeah. Well, we had a Swede from Minnesota, a big, tall guy, and he could really hold his liquor. Well, he was on a truck that never had to hold a trailer, so he took the copper tubing off his trailer and made a coil. And they guys, he was in the hole right across. I guess the general was there by the Mussolini Canal or something. Guy'd say, well, the way his name was, it was like Hotfoot. They'd say, well, Hotfoot's making his laundry today. But what he was doing, he'd take that red vino and boil it down, and pretty soon it would be what they called white lightning. Just almost clear alcohol. We had not orange juice, but what is the other?
Like grapefruit or?
Grapefruit, and put enough in that so we could drink it. And anyways, the guys was down in the brick factory and had a blanket playing cards or something. Italian come along, they painted the bottle, he said, "Aqua," and I said, "Gee." He put his thumb over it, he didn't put my, oh, wow, he spit that out. They didn't have it, it was that white lightning, nothing with it. They just laughed. Then they said, grabbed another bottle and drank some of that and had to give them. So he had to drink of water. Well, one time, this Harlan had cussed an officer and he said, "You dig a 6-foot hole deep enough so it's over your head." Here come Hotfoot with a bottle and, "You're gonna take a drink." I said, "No, I'm here guarding him to dig a hole." Well, he just grabbed me and he had it diluted and poured a lot. I got enough of it. Instead of just guarding, I got down in there and take turns with the shovel. We got that hole dug, and next morning the officer said, "Was that hole deep enough?" "Yes." "Okay, fill it in. Move over and dig another one for a garbage dump." That's what happened with him. I guess I told you about getting the guy that was drunk, and anyways, that was the same guy that had to dig that hole.
Right. All right. Now, when you went north, did you go through Rome or did you go around it?
No, I seen Rome, and one time we were going up the road, and there was Colonel Howes was in a Jeep leading us, and we stopped, and it was right where what is it, Milan was where Mussolini was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we waited. And he said that somebody had been there and said that that office was just trashed. There was nothing in it, they said. We waited. Pretty soon when we headed, there was one bridge went over the one where we was. Here hung Mussolini with a rope around his leg, and his mistress was her skirts would just fall all down over her eyes and stuff. You could just see her. Well, she had petticoat or something on. You could. Mussolini, all the leather boots and leggings and belt and stuff. But anyways, the partisan had caught him and did that, throw him over, and then just shot him full of holes. Well, anyways, when I went by the next day, I could have bought a postcard with a picture of that on for 10 cents and didn't get one. It had been worth something if I'd had it now.
Yeah. It's a pretty famous picture now.
Yeah.
All right. Now you said.
Anyways, then we went north. This Colonel Stanley had finally got killed. Well, one place, the officer said, we're gonna pull in this woods and the kitchen truck is gonna catch up and we'll have a hot meal. We got out and had our mess kit and headed towards the mess truck, and the first thing I knew, here was Russia flying in the air and 3 German tanks shooting in our direction. Each time one if I'd hit the ground, it was rough ground. Boy, was I finally, when I got my big root and laid down, it was over with. But this shell had hit the baggage truck, and the guy was sleeping in there on it. The shell had hit that. All it did was woke him up. Tore the baggage truck, or the bags a lot. That was it.
And was that where Colonel Stanley got killed? Was that where Colonel Stanley got killed?
No, I think it was in Rome, or when they was, I don't know what was it, Tiber River there. Well, when we went across that, here was one of these treads that I carried. It was already over a big hole, and the approach to him was there, and so we got through. But that's where Stanley was killed, I guess. Anyways, our company, or platoon, was 2nd platoon. The 1st platoon had these auto cars and trailer, and they had Bailey Bridge on it. They built Bailey Bridges. One time we come to a place where it's dark, we was gonna park, and started in, and where these Germans had cut trees for camouflage. Them trucks, before they got done, punctured, I think, 37 tires before they got the rest stopped. I don't know how long I drove that auto car with stuff. When we left the States, they was there, and somebody with the tank division was driving my truck and caught a telephone pole with a wheel. Well, my truck was screwed up. When I went down the road, it was like a dog, about 18 inches over from the... Did I ever have a time get around some of them buildings that was made of blocks and catch and tear it out anyways?
Yeah, because they, like the villages, they had really narrow streets.
Yeah.
And so your big truck or your auto car had a hard time just fitting.
Yeah. But I don't know where, but I changed to these Brockway bridge trucks. That's what I had at Anjo when I got caught. But I guess I had got ahead of my hand, that I'd got rid of that truck long and was on that. Anyway, that's the way it was.
All right. Now, let's see. You spent another winter in Italy, because after
Well, that one winter we spent on the Gothic line. I guess what was it? The next town was something Bologna or something. Well, boy, that was one cold winter. The place we was in was ripped up, holes and stuff. We lived in regular tents, army tents. We had our beds, and maintenance had cut barrels, and that was our stove. We had that. It was all they had for fuel was airplane gas. Well, we would fill a 5-gallon can with that, and it was sitting out, and the tube went in. I don't know how come it didn't just pour right in. We kept that going. Sometimes the sparks and stuff would light camouflage or stuff on fire. We'd have to get that out.
All right.
One guy in the tent had, one of the cooks had a small brown dog, and if they was an Italian boy, they would really go after him.
All right. Now this